welcome Lisa back up here now. And before I pass the mic over to her, I just wanted to let everybody know we will have mic runners in each aisle. So please, if you do have a question, she's going to take questions from the audience. We ask if you could raise your hand and just wait for the mic runner to get to you so that everybody in the audience and Lisa as well can hear the questions. And without further delay, let's take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. It's also my understanding that the film might come back to play in the theater again. So just, check the website and let everyone you know.
First and foremost, incredible. I mean, what a debut. Cheers to you. It was so rich and so layered, and there's so much to say. And also cheers to Adam. Where are you, Adam, for continuing to have like the best programming here. So way to go. There's a lot to go into. I thought that it was incredible. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. I'm thrilled that I learned so much. My question is going to be a little more fun. And I want to hear about this Mel Brooks connection. Is this a personal connection? How did we land this? I mean, that was incredible.
During college, I was a volunteer projectionist at a 1920s movie palace in Olympia, Washington. And then I became staff at that theater. I was in charge of fundraising, and I was director of the town's annual film festival. And one year of the film festival, we had a guest come to accompany a presentation of a film he wrote called Jaws 3D, which we played on 35 millimeter, which entailed two projectors kind of projecting at the same time in a diagonal fashion. And that screenwriter happened to be friends with Mel Brooks, and he saw my Kickstarter campaign pop up into his Facebook newsfeed, and he sent me a Facebook message saying, I had no idea, Lisa, that you were working on a film about the Automat. It was such a special place for me. I'm having dinner with my friend Mel Brooks tonight. Do you mind if I tell him about your film? And so he apparently, the way he described it to me is that he mentioned it to Mel at this Chinese dinner, and then Mel spent the whole rest of the dinner talking about the Automat. And so the next day I was on the phone with Mel's assistant, and very shortly thereafter I was on a plane to LA to film this interview. And I was living in Seattle at the time.
Yeah, again, congratulations on just absolutely charming film. I was curious about what I thought was a really successful choice of leaving in all the stuff that a lot of people would edit out, all those little corrections or people questioning why you were doing the film and doing things like that. How did you make the decision to do that?
Well, it wasn't an easy choice. We were pretty torn, and we showed the film to audiences, and some audiences honestly didn't like me being in there, and they were saying, you should not be in there. But our instinct was to try to keep the film as light as possible. And we, in the end, were like pulling out facts and inserting like funny moments. Part of my hope for the film was to reach a wider audience than a historical documentary would normally appeal to, and appeal to people of all ages, not just people who necessarily went to the Automat. So that's what we did. And I could go either way with me being in there or not. Also, if I sound a little weird, it's because I hear myself a little weird because there's this echo. So I'm going to talk to you as best as I can with an echo. This is probably like why the singers, the pop singers, they have, those things in their ears so they can hear themselves really loud.
How did you hit on the subject of the Automat? I mean, you're obviously a little younger than a number of us. And I just wonder, I mean, the gentleman who did it as his graduate study, I understood, but how did you come upon it?
I was a college student and I loved eating in my school cafeteria. I wasn't familiar with the cafeteria format before that, but it was a place that I went and loved going to. I could sit wherever I wanted, and it was a very social up place. I could just sit with someone I didn't know and start talking to them, or they could start talking to me. And that got me curious about where my cafeteria came from. So in the school library, I did some research and, pulled some books from the shelves. I found some articles on microfiche about cafeterias, and that's when I first found the Automat. My family, they're not East Coast, and they had never told me about it. But I thought it was so cool when I found out about it in the library. And the school librarian, she pulled the PhD dissertation for me that Alec, the Automat historian, had written. And so I reached out to him, and I went to the New York Public Library my senior year to go see their collection, because Horn and Hardart donated the company records, the company scrapbooks, and they have amazing scrapbooks. And I encourage you all, the next time you go to New York City and you have some time, make an appointment with the manuscripts and archives room at the New York Public Library. You don't even need to be a New York City resident. Anyone can make an appointment and see the scrapbooks. And they're the most gorgeous scrapbooks in the whole world. They're huge and they're beautiful. And it's amazing that the company did this. But it was also a different time, and this was a very special company. But when I saw this stuff, I realized this is unbelievable that all of this still exists, and I can't believe somebody hasn't already done something with it. And so that's when I got the idea, because I was a projectionist in a theater and I was interested in film, and I had never made a film before, but I figured, what the heck, let's give this a shot. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I was learning along the way, and it took many years, and I did it in my spare time. I was working full-time jobs and I was working in nonprofit cinemas and performing arts centers, film festivals, PR agencies. And so now I'm focusing on, getting the film out there full time. But, this was a passion project for many years. So the question is, when I started this, did I realize that in the end, the film was going to be a story about how society and the world changed? And the answer is, when I started, I really just thought the Automat was this very glamorous, cool foodie thing. And as I went further and further, I kind of realized that the Automat was so much more. And my friends and I were trying to edit this film together, and we had never edited a film. At a certain point, I realized the film really deserved a very experienced editor, at which point I watched some of the greatest films of all time about New York. And I got it in my head, we need to make a great film about New York, because we have the story and the material here to do so. And so I had to get on waiting lists, and I had to do a lot of fundraising, but the film has two very senior, very talented editors. And, we talked about it a lot, about how the film, it wasn't just the story of the Automat. It was a window into America during the 20th century. And it became our intent to, make this film a poignant kind of reflection onto the world and who we are, and a greater story than just the story of the Automat.
It's a wonderful story. Early 60s, I think I had only been to the Automat maybe a couple times. Looking at the audience, I was wondering how many people here had been to the Automat.
We can do the show of hands. Yeah. Let's see. If you've been to the Automat, raise your hand. A lot of you. Yeah.
It was also great that you were able to get the interviews with, Ginsberg and Powell and Reiner and all. It was a thrilling part of the movie.
Well, it was a lot of luck getting them, and one of the kind of takeaways for me of doing this film was how wonderful it is to pick a really strong subject. It was kind of a door opener because, when you say the Automat or Horn and Hardart, especially, here in New York, I mean, we're in Connecticut right now, but in the, New York vicinity, or to people who grew up here, it's something that means a lot to them. And, as I make films going forward, if they're films that I have to, conceive and then push through, because this is, an independent film all the way from start to finish. I'm self-distributing the film. It's hard enough as it is, but to have a strong subject, I think, is really important. It really, any edge you can have to make it a little easier, I think I would go for that.
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of financing the film? There was a long list of supporters. And then also, what about the corporation? I imagine it still lives on in one way, shape, or form. Did you have to get releases or rights from the corporation regarding the film?
We did have a Kickstarter campaign, and there was a long list in the credits of all the Kickstarter backers. And we had angel backers too, who gave larger amounts, and we had foundations and some grants. Unfortunately, the companies weren't exactly around to help, support the film financially. So there were two branches of Horn and Hardart, Philadelphia and New York. The New York company transformed itself into a catalog, mail order catalog business before the internet. So that was really, again, doing something very cutting edge. And their last catalog that lived on was the company store. Maybe some of you know that catalog, but the company store was acquired by Home Depot a few years ago. And so that's kind of the end of H&H in New York. Philadelphia, they were brought out of bankruptcy by a very nice Jewish couple that really believed in the ideals of H&H, and they resurrected it by opening up cafes, H&H cafes outside of New York and Philadelphia, and they were selling their coffee online for a long time. And I did have a legal agreement with them, like a brand licensing kind of agreement, allowing me to use the Horn and Hardart name. And I can't make merch with Horn and Hardart's name on it without their approval, for example. But, if I wanted to make merch, they would say yes. But I don't want to make merch because it's already enough of a pain, selling posters. I just don't want to deal with selling merch. But we do have posters available online,
I'm curious, the warehouse in the Catskills still has, it's being housed, and who's paying for that storage? It's in such disrepair. The equipment up there.
So we filmed that barn on day one in 2013, which was when production began on this film. It was the first day of shooting. I was still a college student, and I wrangled my classmate to go with me and film that. And that barn belongs to Steve Stolman, the Automat collector. I would imagine, because I know he has sold machines since 2013, since the New York Public Library exhibit about the Automat, where they had one of his automats restored and on display. So I think there would be less in that barn now, but I know he has a few for sale still. But fortunately, a few museums have automats in their collections, including the Smithsonian, even though the Smithsonian has all of their automat stuff in storage right now. But it's there. They acquired everything that was in that first Automat in Philadelphia from 818 Chestnut Street. That footage of the auction, that auction was of the building, but the machines, those were taken by the Smithsonian. They have all of them. Thank goodness. I imagine they're temperature controlled there because that barn was very cold.
Thank you, Lisa. Has there been any appeal for younger people to watch this movie, or has there been any reaction to it from younger people?
You know, at every screening, there's a few people that are kind of outliers that, you know, don't look like everyone else. And that definitely was part of my hope. But it's also okay that this film, you know, primarily appeals to the people that ate there. And one of, I'd say, my major goal was to bring joy to all the people who went there and for them to get to relive that and also see a different side of the story that they didn't know. So regardless of who shows up, I'm incredibly pleased by how everything's turning out for the film.
Yeah, my question, by the way, it was a great film. Congratulations. And you did a terrific job. You talked about the auction when they went bankrupt. Did they not own the buildings that they leased the properties in? What happened to those buildings? I mean,
so I should know the answer to your question, but what I think was going on is that they owned some of the buildings and that they had long-term leases on some of the buildings, and that at a certain point, those long-term leases came up. At a certain point, the company went into a real struggle when all of a sudden they had competition and the world was really changing around it and they couldn't keep up. And eventually, the things that were working well for the company, they had to sell off. So, you know, whatever great real estate they had to use it to pay off their debts. And they were really trying to reinvent themselves towards the end. And the catalogs were what were doing well. The fast food franchises, those were doing well, but they had to get rid of the fast food franchises because they were in debt. They sold them back to the parent companies, to Burger King, to Arby's, and they got out of the food business entirely. You can. I'll answer that question after you. Yeah,
how
you can
long
go
did
for
it take you to make the documentary?
So we started production in 2013. The film was supposed to premiere at the 2020 Telluride Film Festival. That festival was canceled, and I sat on the film for a year. Thank goodness the film was accepted again by that festival, and they premiered it at the 2021 Telluride Film Festival. But I am only aware of one other film, The Duke, which was supposed to premiere at Telluride 2020, and then it premiered at Telluride 2021. Okay, so then the other question was, what's next for me? So the first thing that's right now is releasing the Automat because I'm self-distributing. So it's, you know, going to different theaters to show it, and we're self-theatrically distributing the film. So every Friday, the film opens in more and more theaters across the country. Starting June 3rd, the film will be available on video on demand for people to purchase at home from places like pay-per-view on cable and the iTunes store. And I have co-written a script that I'm going to direct, which is a rom-com in the vein of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but with Italians. And it's set in Italy, but it's all in English. And so you can expect to see me make the transition from, documentary filmmaker to fiction filmmaker next time.
Actually, my question was going to be about distribution. I'm on the board of Arts Westchester, located in White Plains, and we're the largest not-for-profit arts agency in the state. And I was just thinking you would have such an audience there. I don't know, have you heard of the Jacob Burns Theater at all in Pleasantville? They're an independent theater, and I just think that would be a wonderful place for you to show your movie. But
So the Automat opened at Jacob Burns, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's been doing very well there. And so if you know anybody in Westchester, please tell them it's playing every day at Jacob Burns. At least probably for the next month, but so tell them to go soon.
Folks, on that note, let's thank Lisa again.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, I'll be in the lobby afterwards.